Hi there, and welcome to this video on dividing by decimals. Before we get stuck into some questions, I just want to talk through a little bit of mathematics that will help us understand the process of dividing by decimals. Hopefully we all know that if we had 8 divided by 4, the answer would be 2. How many 4s fit into 8? The answer would be 2. If I was to go ahead and multiply those numbers by 10, so the 8 times by 10 and the 4 times by 10, then I went ahead and did the division, I would still get the same answer. I would still get 2 as my answer. How many 40s fit into 80? Well, that is still 2, even though we've multiplied the question by 10. If I was to go back to my original question and multiply it by 100, so 8 times 100 and 4 times 100, when I go ahead and do the division, I still get the answer 2. How many 400s fit into 800? Well, that is still 2. So even though we've now increased the original question and multiplied it by 100, each value in the question is multiplied by 100, our answer has remained the same. It would also work if we took the original question and divided both parts of the question by 10. If we divided by 10, 8 divided by 10 is 0.8, 4 divided by 10 is 0.4. As long as we're doing the same to each part of the question, it is not going to affect the answer once we go ahead and carry out the division. How many 0.4s are in 0.8? That is still 2. So we can use this little bit of information, we can use this little bit of mathematics to help us approach dividing by decimal questions. Because what we can do is we can manipulate the question or change the question slightly to make it a little bit easier to divide. And then when we divide it in this easier fashion, the result we get is going to be the same result from our original question. Let's have a go at a question. Okay, so if I give you the question 16 divided by 0.2, I want to make this question a little bit easier. So really, I want this number, the number I'm dividing by, to be a whole number, to be an integer. Because to do this division in my head could be a little bit tricky. So I'm just going to make the question a bit easier. So here's my working out. So what I did to the original question is I multiplied both parts of the question by 10. So 16 became 160 and 0.2 became 2. So then I was left with an easier division, 160 divided by 2. So you could have approached that as half 160 to get my answer 80. Or you could have set it up in the bus stop method of division, or any method of division that you're comfortable with. I'll just talk you through this bus stop method of division. How many 2's go into 1? The answer is 0, and the 1 moves over next door. How many 2's go into 16? The answer is 8. How many 2's go into 0? The answer is 0, leaving me with an answer of 80. So the answer to this question is 80. But using what we talked about on the very first slide, that also means that the answer to the original question is 80 as well. So we can confidently state that the answer to this question is 80. We just played around with the question a little bit to make it a little bit easier to divide by changing this number into an integer, into a whole number. Let's have a look at another question. 14.5 divided by 0.5. Again, at first glance, that looks a little bit tricky. So I'm going to manipulate the question. I'm going to play around with the question to make it a bit easier. In order to make it easier, I want this number here to be an integer, really. That would make my life a lot easier when approaching this question. So again, what I've done is I've took both parts of the original question and multiplied them by 10. So 14.5 has become 145 and 0.5 has become 5. So this is the division I'm going to go ahead and do. And I know that the result of this division will be exactly the same as the answer to this division. So you could work out how many 5s fit into 145 mentally, or you could set it up in a written method of division. How many 5s go into 1 is 0, the 1 moves over. How many 5s go into 14? 2, with 4 left over, so that moves over. How many 5s go into 45? The answer is 9. So the answer to my question is 29. The answer to this question is 29, which means the answer to the original question is also 29. Okay, remember at this point you do have the ability to pause the video. So if you want to go ahead and have a go at this question yourself before I talk through my method, then please go ahead and do that now. When I look at the original question, I want to make it easier for myself. So I'm going to change this into a whole number, into an integer. This time I'm going to need to multiply by 100. Because if I just multiplied by 10, I'd be left with 0.3. But I want to make the question as easy as possible to divide. So multiplying by 100 is more appropriate in this question. Here's my working out. So here's my original question. And this time I've multiplied both parts of my question by 100. So 24 has become 2,400. And 0.03 when multiplied by 100 becomes 3. So now I'm going to go ahead and do this division. And I know that the answer to this is exactly the same answer to this. So I'm going to set it up in a written method of division. How many 3s go into 2? That is 0. The 2 moves over. How many 3s into 24? That is 8. How many 3s into 0? That is 0. How many 3s into 0? That is also 0, leaving me with an answer of 800. So 800 is the answer to how many 3s fit into 2,400, but it is also the answer to my original question, 24 divided by 0.03. One more example for me. Again, you can go ahead and have a go at this question yourself if you want to pause the video now. Okay, so to approach this question, I want to make it easier for myself. So what I want is I want this number to be a whole number. I want this to be an integer. So I'm going to multiply this by 10 to make it 5. So at the same time, I'm going to need to multiply this by 10. But you'll notice this number will still remain as a decimal. But that's okay, because I just want to choose a way to make the question easier. I could multiply this by 1,000 and this by 1,000, so they are both whole numbers. But I want the question to be as easy as possible. So once I review the question, I think the easiest way to approach this is just to change this number into a whole number, this number into an integer. So this is my working out for this one. I've took my original question and I've multiplied both parts of the question by 10. So 0.665 is now 6.65 and 0.5 is now 5. So this is the important part of the question. I've made this number, the number I'm dividing by, I've made it a whole number. Even though this remains as a decimal, it doesn't really affect the rest of my method, as we can see over here. Our division goes ahead exactly the same. The only difference is we need to remember if we've got a decimal under the bus stop here, it needs to go directly above up here. So I can go ahead and do my division. How many 5s are in 6? That would be 1 with 1 left over. How many 5s are in 16? That would be 3 with 1 left over. How many 5s are in 15? That would be 3. So the process of dividing is exactly the same. We just need to remember that if there's a decimal in this number, then the decimal point needs to go directly above it in my answer. So just a reminder that we could have multiplied both numbers by 1000 to make them both whole numbers. We would have ended up with the same answer. But we're trying to make the question as easy as possible, and multiplying by 10 to leave me with this question was the easiest option. So now I received my answer of 1.33, so I know the answer to the original question is also 1.33. Okay, so now it's your turn to have a go at a few questions. I've displayed 4 questions on the screen. For each question, I'd like you to show me a full written method. So you need to show me your full working out. How would you go ahead and calculate these division questions? As has been shown in the previous slides, we are focused on a non-calculator method today. So you can't just reach for your calculator and input the calculation. You need to be showing a full written method, as that's what will be expected in your tests and exams. Okay, could you pause the video at this point and have a go at all 4 questions? Okay, welcome back. This is what my working out looks like. So you can see for each question, I've had a little look at the original question, I've analysed the original question, and I've decided if I want to multiply it by 10 or 100 to make the calculation, to make the division easier. That usually involves making sure this number, the second number in the calculation, is a whole number, is an integer. Then you go ahead and set up the bus stop method of division, or any method of division that you're comfortable with. Once you calculate that, the answer to your question here will be exactly the same answer as the original question. So you can spend a little bit of time just marking and assessing your answers. And if you have made any little errors, you could go ahead and correct them now. If we look at the last question, I've went ahead and multiplied by 10 to make the 0.5 into a 5. You could have approached the question by multiplying both numbers by 1,000, but we're always aiming to make the question as easy as possible, and I believe multiplying by 10 to make this number 5, to make this number a whole number, is the easiest approach to this question. So then you can go ahead, do the calculation to receive your answer. Very well done if you were able to get all 4 of those questions correct. Okay, here's another set of questions for you to have a go at. For each question, if you can again show me a full written method of how you found your correct answer. If you look at question A and B, you will see that the number you are dividing by is already a whole number, is already an integer. So for question A and B, you may not be required to multiply the question by 10 or 100, as that second part of your division is already a whole number. For each of these questions, can you show me a full written method? Could you pause the video and have a go at all questions now? Okay, welcome back. my solutions look like this. Could you spend a little bit of time just marking up your answers and comparing them to the answers on the screen? Very well done if you were able to get all 9 answers correct. Especially question H, where if you set it up using the division method, the bus stop method of division, you will find that you're left with a recurring decimal. So you should have ended up with 0.8333, and that 3 would continue to recur, which we could present with a dot above it to show that the 3 is recurring, or we could have converted into a fraction 5/6. Very well done if you were able to get all 9 correct. That shows a very good understanding of dividing by a decimal.